This all happened back when I was in college, around 6 years ago. I was a junior at a big state university, just trying to get my degree and enjoy the whole college experience before having to become a real adult with a career and responsibilities and all that. My friends and I lived off campus in a pretty run-down rental house close to the bars and parties. It was kind of a shithole, but it was cheap and let us be as loud and reckless as we wanted without any RAs telling us to keep it down. One weekend in early October, a bunch of my buddies and I decided to throw a big rager at our place to kick off the Halloween season. We spent a couple days prepping by stockpiling cases of Natty Light and Keystone and all the other cheap, shitty beers college kids love. We also made sure to mix up several of those plastic tub punch concoctions where you just toss in random sodas, juices, and bottom-shelf liquors together. The final product always tasted like gasoline, but it got you plastered on a budget, so we didn't care. By 10 p.m. on the night of the party, people had already started flooding in and the crowd was building quickly. We literally just put the word out on social media, texted friends, hit up group chats, and left it as an open invitation for anybody to show up. My buddies and I weren't exactly selective or concerned about putting any limits on the guest list. The more people that showed up, the better the party, at least in our minds at the time. Around midnight, you could barely even move through the house without shoving your way through the sweaty, drunken mess of people. Every room was crammed full of rowdy students. Drinks were being spilled everywhere. The air was thick with smoke. Music was thumping at ridiculously loud volumes from the speakers we had set up. Empty cups, bottles, and crushed beer cans were strewn about every surface. Just your standard, out-of-control, huge college house party scene, really. At some point that night, maybe around 1 a.m., I was drunkenly bobbing and weaving my way from the living room towards the bathroom, trying my best not to spill my drink or run face first into anyone. That's when I noticed this one dude standing off by himself in the crowded room. He just looked weird, out of place, and sketchy as hell. He was tall and gaunt with longish greasy hair, beady eyes, and a permanent scowl on his face. Dressed in old, ill-fitting clothes, like he literally found that outfit buried in a dumpster and put it on. The whole getup made him look vaguely homeless, but also vaguely threatening, like he wouldn't be out of place on a wanted poster or mugshot. No idea who this guy was or how he even ended up at our rager. Sure, my friends and I cast a wide net when spreading the word about the party, but there's no way any of us actually knew this dude and invited his creepy ass. To this day, I have no clue how he found his way into our house and into the crowd that night. As I was squeezing past him in that narrow hallway, I accidentally made eye contact. In that brief moment, the guy just stared right through me with the hardest, most chilling death stare I've ever seen, like he was seconds away from just completely losing it and going totally ballistic right there in that instant. Those dead, soulless eyes were almost daring me to look away first. I tried to just write it off as a drunk people being drunk and moved on, but I couldn't shake how deeply unsettled and creeped out I felt after that. There was just something evil about that guy's whole vibe and demeanor. Yeah, I know that sounds stupid and melodramatic as hell, but in that moment it honestly felt like I had just witnessed a disturbing glimpse into the eyes of true, raw evil or something along those lines. Gave me the heaviest case of unexplainable bad vibes I've ever experienced. Maybe an hour or so later, I was out on the back patio catching a breather and trying to escape the sweatbox heat and smell of the house. A small group of buddies were out there with me, doing the same. That's when we suddenly heard a bunch of commotion and shouting coming from the front of the house. At first, your typical drunken idiot is always shouting about something stupid at parties like that, so we didn't think much of it initially. But then someone came rushing out back, shouting at the top of their lungs, "Call 911, someone's been stabbed." My drunk brain honestly could not even begin to process that at first. Stabbed? At our own supposedly chill kickback? As in, with an actual knife and blood and everything? By who? As my friends and I started making our way around to the front of the house again, the scene that unfolded was complete pandemonium. Security guards from the campus PD or somewhere were trying to get people to stop crowding and clear out of the house. People were screaming and freaking the hell out everywhere you looked. And there, Lying in a pool of blood on our dingy living room floor was the sketchy hallway dude from earlier that night. He had been stabbed multiple times in the torso area from what I could see, with the sheer amount of blood everywhere and the grotesque wound holes. It was honestly amazing he was still alive and breathing at all as we came across the scene. Apparently, some other random person that nobody at the party seemed to be able to identify had gotten into an altercation or dispute with sketchy hallway dude for some unknown reason. In the midst of that, the instigator pulled out a knife and started just brutally stabbing the guy over and over in a frenzied stabbing spree. Just some mindless, horrific act of violence by an unhinged maniac. While the rest of us were just having typical drunken college kid fun, two complete strangers that didn't belong at our party somehow crossed paths inside our place, and one ended up stabbing the other repeatedly. All amid the chaos of the rager, where clearly anyone and everyone was able to wander in unchecked. The cops and paramedics showed up pretty quickly, but definitely not quickly enough. By the time they arrived on the scene, the stabbing victim, who we would later learn was some 32-year-old drifter just looking for somewhere to score free drinks, had lost so much blood from the deep lacerations. The paramedics tried their best, but soon after rushing him away in the ambulance, we found out he ended up dying at the hospital from the blood loss and severity of the wounds. So now we had an actual literal homicide take place inside of our shitty rental home, during a standard Friday night party no less. I'm pretty sure we all aged several years in sheer stress and panic over the course of the following hours. The police kicked into high gear, immediately rounding people up and taking statements while desperately trying to identify any and all individuals involved in the altercation. Me and my roommates all got grilled for what felt like forever, but we obviously knew nothing useful beyond the fact that there was some guy we'd never seen before who got stabbed by another guy we'd never seen before. We were useless as witnesses. As sloppy drunk overservers of alcohol to minors, we could have landed in huge legal trouble ourselves. Fortunately, I think the cops realized pretty quickly that we were just a bunch of idiot kids who never foresaw someone getting murdered as a possible consequence of our rager. We ended up avoiding any serious charges besides some relatively minor citations. Considering the wild circumstances, I'd say we got extremely lucky there. For the next several months, the police conducted a full-scale homicide investigation and was issuing pleas to the public for any information that could help identify the killer or determine a motive. But it was all to no avail. They eventually hit a dead end and ran out of clues, with zero suspects ever being named or coming forward. In the end, they never caught the killer. No suspects, no motives, no closure or justice for the victim's family. Just some nameless and faceless psycho that happened to show up at our out-of-control college party, get into a random altercation with another random person there, and brutally murder them in the midst of a crowd of witnesses, too drunk to be of any help. Then he was gone, slipped out into the night undetected before anyone even realized at first what exactly had occurred. No signs of him after that night, no trail to follow, as if it was all just a random act of senseless evil that came and went in a blink. A ghost. I'll never forget the visceral image of that poor victim's body, lying face down in our living room, surrounded by spilled drinks and oblivious partygoers having no clue they were stumbling around the scene of a horrific stabbing. A dark crimson pool formed by the blood seeping from multiple gashes all over his abdomen, the paramedics shouting furiously as they tried in vain to stop the bleeding and save his life right there on our cheap, stained carpet. But there was just so goddamn much blood. It soaked into the fibers of that ratty old carpet, leaving a huge dark stain that we could never get out no matter how hard we tried scrubbing and treating it in the aftermath. It was there as an ever-present visceral reminder of the horror that had unfolded in our home every time someone walked through that living room. We ended up just ripping out that whole section of the living room floor and replacing it when we moved out at the end of the year. But even after we got rid of the physical reminder, the mental images never went away. After what I saw that night, it would be a long time before I could ever get the sight of that lifeless body out of my mind. Every time I closed my eyes to sleep, I could see the dead guy's face looking back at me, could see the vacant, glossed-over expression and all the blood surrounding him. Could see glimpses of that deranged psycho killer still dressed in his creepy outfit, hovering above the body and plunging the knife over and over, until he was sure his grisly work was completed and his victim was finished off. The sounds of the panicked screams and shouting that suddenly drowned out the party music as the first witnesses came across the scene. No matter how hard I tried to move on and accept it all as just being a random, unpredictable act of violence, the messed up shit still lingered in my mind far too vividly. It ate away at me for months and months after that horrible night, as the investigation played out with no answers or resolution. Whenever I went back to that rental house afterward, I felt like I could still see faint outlines of where the bloodstain used to be, even after it was replaced. Part of me wondered if anyone would ever really be comfortable living in that house again long-term, after what transpired there. After that party, I could never again go back to that naive state of thinking everywhere was inherently safe and nothing that bad could ever happen around me. Because now I know firsthand that real evil exists in this world. It can reveal itself at any time, through anyone, literally in your own home or community when you least suspect it. The most mundane, routine settings where you let your guard down are often where the true monsters and sickos end up materializing, ready to pounce. So yeah, be careful out there. And don't take your normal, comfortable life for granted. Appreciate the periods of peace when you have them, because you really never know when your own night could turn into an utter, inescapable horror show, like the one that will be seared into my brain forever. Stay alert, stay safe, and always keep watching for warning signs of potential sudden violence. No matter how chill the vibes might seem on the surface. Otherwise, you could end up like that unfortunate bastard, killed for no reason at what was supposed to be just another fun weekend get-together to blow off some steam. That's the sad reality we live in sometimes, as ugly and messed up as it may be.